Yossi Klein HaLevi was born in Brooklyn and immigrated to Israel in 1982. He's an author and a journalist, and his work has often been controversial, challenging views on the left and right. His first book, Memoirs of a Jewish Extremist, told about his brief membership while in his 20s in the militant Jewish Defense League. In his second book, At the Entrance to the Garden of Eden, he recounts his journey of meeting and praying with both Muslims and Christians, in Israel as well as in the West Bank and Gaza. Yossi is currently a senior fellow at the Adelson Institute for Strategic Studies in Jerusalem.
Denial of Israel's right to exist, not only in Hamas media, also in the supposedly moderate Fatah media. The Holocaust is a Zionist myth. If you're asking me what I need as a sign that we can really move toward peace, very simple. Begin debating who I am and why I'm here. Until that happens, you're going to continue having a mindset which you'll find throughout the Middle East, that the Jews are thieves, colonialists, invaders, and instead of who we really are, which is an ancient people returning home, a native people. I need signs that the Middle East, the Arab world, is ready to begin to come to terms with my indigenousness. This baseless propaganda that Arafat began, that all of the terrorism and all of the war that happened, this 5 years of suicide bombings happened because Sharon walked on the Temple Mount. Now, I looked into it. I interviewed Sharon a couple months afterwards, and he told me the following story, that before he went up to the Temple Mount, he checked with Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who was from the Labour Party. Sharon was in the Likud. There was certainly no collusion going on. Barak said, I'll check with the Palestinians. He calls Rajub. Rajub was at the time head of Arafat's security in the West Bank. Rajub said, no problem. Sharon goes up on the Temple Mount, and there's no violence that day. The violence begins the next day or 2 days later, when Arafat realizes he has a gold mine here. He can use this to launch the war that was on the way. It's a fraud, simply a fraud, and it's one more example of not holding the Palestinian leadership to a level of responsibility for their actions. The first time in history that Palestinians were in charge of their own territory without any occupation, without any military presence, roadblock, and instead of trying to make a go of it, instead of saying, okay, we have a chance now to create in microcosm what a Palestinian state will look like. The missiles never stopped, Hamas takes over, and Israel basically bit its lip for 3 years, 3 long years of missiles falling on Israeli towns and kibbutzim day after day, until finally the public just couldn't bear it anymore and forced the government to do what any government in the world has the most minimal responsibility to do, which is protect your citizens from aggression. On the one hand, when it's Israel versus the Palestinians, we're Goliath and they're David. But if you widen the lens, Israel is David and the Arab and Muslim world are Goliath. And what Israel is facing in its conflict in Gaza or 2 years ago with Hezbollah in Lebanon are essentially proxy wars that we're fighting with Iran. Both Hamas and Hezbollah are satellites of Iran. The conflict has totally changed from the way it was, say, in the 80s or the 90s, when it was a conflict over the creation of a Palestinian state, and that conflict ended in the year 2000, when Israel said yes to a Palestinian state, and then the Palestinian issue became, in effect, co-opted by jihadism. And this is being directed by Iran, and directed not just ideologically, but very practically. The weapons, the missiles, the training is all coming from Iran. Hamas, Hezbollah send their people to Iran, and the Revolutionary Guards were fighting alongside of Hezbollah, for example. The first step is that Iran is pushed out of the Arab world. Hezbollah and Hamas are defeated, and Lebanon is allowed to become a truly sovereign state again, and the Palestinians in Gaza have a leadership that is worthy of a people aspiring for a decent life. A leadership that wants to build a Palestinian state more than it wants to destroy a Jewish state.